All right, Michael here with the Reason RX podcast, all things education. Melanie will be joining us soon, but today we're talking about something that'll help us develop good thinking skills, be more independent and logical. To do that, we need to observe things well and put them together to form conclusions in a bigger picture. That's the important thing about reasoning and science and thinking. It's what education should really train us to do instead of just memorize. We shouldn't just memorize stuff from some trusted authority just because they want us to. Because we need to know what's really true and how to make something of it so we can live better, help ourselves, help our friends and family, help society and make it better. We don't just want to, it's nice to please your teacher, but there's more to life than that. Knowledge is for surviving and thriving, helping ourselves, our pets, the wildlife, the world we live in, family, society. And tracking, I think, helps us do this in a way that many other things don't. So tracking really puts you in touch with the reality, because no way is this like memorization or fiction storytelling. And tracking doesn't lie. It's right there. The tracks, the context, the ecology. So when you're doing that, you got to develop powers of observation to identify shape, pattern, color, texture, direction. So it's good for your brain and mind. It's been shown to, people know nowadays when you're older, quote unquote, you need to take up new things to stay mentally active, to stay younger and more alert, and to live better. And of course, that's what kids need to do in the first place, so they learn how to think. And like Maria Montessori knew that really well. We got to get that and then put it all together. In tracking, you got the whole context of geography and biology and math and physics and art and chemistry and the universe. It's all right there in front of you. All we got to do is observe, conceptualize, and connect. It's not like memorizing a bunch of stuff and then regurgitating on a test and forgetting. Math is great, helps us be logical, but I think tracking helps us in ways that math doesn't. So when we're doing this stuff, you got to ask, like, what is this track? What is the nature of it? What animal made it? What's the nature of the animal? What is it doing in the environment? And what is it doing to live? How does it live? And what is the environment like? What else is here and why? You start with this little thing and develop into a big picture. So you're really, you can really feel like you're learning science for the first time. At least I did. I know math, physics, chemistry, philosophy, but it wasn't until I started digging into like tracking and foraging that I really felt like I was learning science for the first time in my life. And it gets you involved. So everyone, child, student, parent, teacher, adult, no matter what, you're outside, you're moving, you're exercising, you're observing, you're exploring. So your brain and body will work in new ways. So, tracking is really good for you. So we want to discuss that today. So there's some motivation for you as to why. So we're going to have a tracker on here today, Kim Cabrera, talking to us about it, like what it is, how it helps you, her experiences with it. Kim, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, this is Kim Cabrera, and I'm a tracker, and I've been tracking most of my adult life, and I hope I can pass on some information that you'll find useful.
Definitely. So Kim has a website, and I'll link to this in the show notes. And we got, let me see, it's beartracker.com with a dash in there, but it'll be in the show notes. You can check it out. And that's when I started doing some foraging and tracking, I stumbled upon, and it was the best one I found And then I found out she had a trekking group on Facebook. And how long have you had this website, Kim?
The website I started building back around 1997 or 98, so it's been up there a little over 20 years now.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's getting old.
Old but good.
Yep.
But, so, where'd you go to college?
I went to college at Humboldt State University, which is in northwestern California. I always wanted to study wildlife biology, and I came up here to study that, and ended up in a different program for health reasons, but I really enjoyed the program up here because Humboldt State has access to a lot of natural resources around. It's near Redwood National Park. There's a bunch of state parks around, and it was a really good place to go to school for wildlife because it has a very well-recognized wildlife program.
Yeah, I bet. And y'all actually have, in California, some bigger trees than we do in Texas.
Yeah, the redwood trees are the tallest trees in the world.
So not everything is bigger in Texas.
That's right. You don't have coast redwoods.
Yeah. But, and so what degree did you end up getting there?
I got my bachelor in science, and it was in natural resources planning and interpretation.
What is that about?
Well, the planning part would be more, that's out of my realm. I did the interpretation wing of it, and that involves doing educational programs in parks. So, where you go to the park and the park ranger is giving the campfire talk, or taking you on a nature walk and leading you around and showing you stuff, or doing educational programs in parks and preparing, brochures, pamphlets, presentations,
cool.
The trail signage, that kind of thing.
What parks have you worked in?
I worked in a few. I worked at down in Southern California, Palomar Mountain State Park, and then up north here, Humboldt Redwood State Park, and did a little bit of work for Prairie Creek Redwood State Park, and then I worked at a concessionaire in the Grand Canyon. I didn't work for the parks. That was kind of a fun experience too.
I'll bet.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Sounds like you've had some nice offices to work in the past.
I know, right?
Yeah, talk about beautiful.
Yeah.
Most people go in and got 4 walls and artificial lighting, and you've got all this majesty out there.
Right. Yeah, it was really especially fun to work in the redwoods and the Grand Canyon because they're just so huge and so beautiful, and just so much nature right there, right in your Go walking on your days off, you just go for a walk. Kind of fun.
Yeah. Most people, I'm gonna go to another office, and you walk in the stuff, and you're like, I'm gonna go to another office, and you walk outdoors. Yeah. Nice.
Cool.
But so how'd you get into tracking?
Oh, I first started learning tracking. I mean, I guess my dad showed me my first tracks when I was just a little kid. He would take me with him where we lived. There was some hills that were behind the town where we lived, and he would take me walking up there. And he would show me things like, here's a snake track, here's a coyote track, stuff like that. And then it wasn't, that I was really young, so, I just was like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool, As a kid, I was probably 5 or 6. And then I really got into it in the late 70s. I got a hold of the book called The Tracker, which was by Tom Brown. And that was the book that kind of launched a lot of tracking careers because, it showed that tracking was still alive and well, and that, it could be learned in a more modern context. And so, I got that book and kind of caught the bug again when I was in junior high school, which was, late 70s. And after that, I got the Peterson Field Guide to Animal Tracks and just started drawing those tracks.
Cool.
So I could learn those shapes. So I kind of self-taught myself originally, starting way back then. And then later on, when the Cyber Tracker came over here, which was around 2005, I started to get interested in that, and I started taking the Cyber Tracker evaluations in 2013. So those are fun. I really recommended it. Great learning experience for tracking.
And what is a Cyber Tracker for the audience?
Well, the name is a little bit confusing because it's not really tracking on a computer. The original Cyber Tracker was created in South Africa by Louis Liebenberg, and it was created to allow the native trackers there to contribute to conservation efforts by utilizing a Palm Pilot device, which had a GPS incorporated in it, and it had the software itself, the Cyber Tracker software, was icon-based. So it had that, and it had a GPS, and so the trackers there that couldn't read or write, they could actually use the icons to record their observations. So say, I saw a rhino, and it was doing this, that, eating this plant, or whatever. They'd be able to record these detailed observations with GPS locations. And so it was a great assistance to scientists and conservation efforts because, scientists go there and study the animals, and they may see them one season of the year, and so they don't see the variation in the diets that the animals go throughout the year as different types of plants ripen and things like that. So that's where the original Cyber Tracker came from. That's where the name came from, is it was software designed for that. And beyond that, it has now become the only internationally recognized evaluation system for tracking skills. And they do it in South Africa. They use the evaluation system to evaluate the guides, the ones that take the tourists around and guide them to the animals. So being certified over there is equivalent to, you're getting a good job over there. And so far it hasn't gotten to that over here in the U.S., but eventually I think that's kind of the hope, is it will lead to that. But, the folks over in South Africa are some of the best trackers in the world. They live in a sandy environment, and they've got highly developed tracking skills that go back many, many generations. And so these have been passed on, and so they're some of the best trackers around. So this system was brought over to the U.S., and currently it's run on an evaluation system where you go for a 2-day evaluation where you're asked a certain number of questions of varying levels of difficulty of the tracks, and you can get certified based on your score on that. And there's 2 different levels. There's a lower band and there's a higher band of certification. The specialist level is the higher band is certification, and you can get up to a level 4 if you score 100% on a lower band evaluation.
Let me interrupt 1 second and get our co-host Melanie on. Melanie,
all right.
Everybody had to pick up her daughter Kira, bring her home from ballet. So Melanie's just going to join us now. Let me add Melanie in here. Now I press the add button. I'm such a genius. Let's see. Hey.
Hi.
Okay. So I was stupid, and it took me a second to figure out how to add you, because I had to figure out that you press. It's really difficult. You got to press the add button.
Oh, I thought you did that before. I got it all figured out or something.
I thought we did too, and then I messed it up.
Oh no.
So, okay. All right.
Hi, Kim.
Yeah.
Hi.
Melanie, meet Kim.
Sorry,
Kim,
I'm
meet
late.
Melanie.
Hi, Melanie.
Yeah. Child chauffeuring, back and forth and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so did you want to introduce yourself more, Melanie, before we go on, or?
Just live in Minnesota, and I homeschool our 3 kids and teach private music lessons. I have a studio, and very excited to meet you and hear all about your experiences and background and what you're working on, that kind of thing. So this will be exciting.
All right. Well, great to meet you too.
Thanks.
And so, Melanie, we've talked, I've done my monologue, and Kim fell asleep, had to wake her up. And we've talked about her background. We're doing a little more now, talking about this program called Cyber Tracker.
Okay. Are we in the program already?
Yeah. We can edit this out.
Oh, gosh. I thought we were all just waiting to go, and I was like, oh, you've been waiting for me. Okay. All right. Yeah, no, that's great.
Okay. Or maybe we'll just leave it in.
Yeah. Just for fun.
Yeah. All right. So, all right, folks. So Melanie has joined us. Melanie, would you like to say hi?
Yes, I would. Hi, everybody. Glad you could all listen, and thanks so much for being on, Kim.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome.
Did Kira have a good time at ballet today?
Oh, yeah. They ran late, of course. So, yeah, she liked it, though. She loves ballet.
Yeah. Otherwise, you could have been here when we started.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Kira's fault. All right. So, we're talking about the Cyber Tracker program and how it started in Africa.
Still there?
Yeah. So, what else do you have to tell us about that? How else might people be interested,
there?
Kim?
Hello? Can you hear me, Kim?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we lost. Huh?
Hello?
Lost somebody.
Hello?
We can't hear you, Michael.
Well, that's your fault.
Huh.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh,
Now we can hear you.
I don't know. I swear I didn't move anything, but my microphone was like muted.
Yeah, I think that was mine. I wanted to mute mine because we had some noise coming in, but I just thought, I must have hit yours, so
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
I didn't know that I have that much control. Wow.
Damn.
Wow.
I'm so sorry. Oh,
The
Lord,
power
just-
of mom.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, so anyway, folks, so we were talking about the Cyber Tracker program. Kim, like, how else would people, like, what else can you tell us about it? How else might people be interested in that?
It's really useful, I think, to have certified trackers doing biological surveys and scientific studies that involve any identification of the tracks and sign of animals, because their skill level has actually been challenged. It's been gone through a pretty rigorous certification process, and you know that when they score 90 to 99% on a specialist evaluation, that you can pretty well rely on what their observations of the tracks. So I think it's useful that way, and it probably will be more and more useful as more folks get certified and as more scientific studies start relying on trackers.
And that's something for people to keep in mind. I think that's kind of off the radar for a lot of people. They think about getting a black belt or getting certified in chess or something, and that's good. But
Yeah.
I think because of the things we talked about at the beginning, I think this is something that should be on more people's radar and to-do list, getting certified and some tracking for all the benefits it has for your mind and brain and health and the social aspects.
Oh, yeah. And it's a great learning experience, too, just going through the whole evaluation process. It really helps you to solidify in your mind the things you do know and the things you need to work on. Because it'll come up, there'll be questions that'll come up, and if you find some of them difficult, then you know you need to work more on that skill or learning the track and sign of that particular species. So it's a pretty challenging, but it's also very rewarding in that you realize how much you have learned over time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that for example, on my own, from getting certified in MoveNet, I knew a certain amount, but it wasn't until I got certified by experts and I had to study all this and really get this down that I really understood movement better.
Yeah, it does focus your studies more so that you can learn the things you need to learn to recognize those things.
Yeah.
The particular science that you're looking at, the tracks of a particular species.
Yeah, and I think it's good for people. It's not just like some tests people do a lot, like in, for example, English or history, where they can BS.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a well-known thing for generations. I just BS'd and got 100 on my essay. But you can't do that in tracking.
No, you can't do that. You have to be right, or it's either right or wrong. And, you look at the track and you look at the sign that the animal has left, whether that's a burrow or a feather or a skull or any particular sign an animal could leave, and it's either right or wrong.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that come up in tracking? Like, you got, as you said, some right there. You got bones you find, tracks themselves. And I learned on your website. And remember, people can take it one step at a time. You don't got to do everything. Just go with what you're interested in. There's
right.
The tracks. It's good to learn. Then you can also get into the scat. That might throw some people off at the beginning, but then just don't get into it. Look at the tracks. You don't like bones, you don't like scat, don't do it. But if you want to get more interested in plants and animals, then you can dig into that more. But what are some of the characteristics of tracks that people need to know? They would come up when they're learning it.
So to identify individual tracks.
Yeah.
So the size of the track, number of toes, presence or absence of claws, the overall shape of the toes, the shape of the heel and palm pads, and location where you find the tracks, so whether you're in the range of a particular species or not. The habitat helps also. So when you're looking at tracks, you're also looking at the environment around it, because tracks don't occur in isolation from the environment. So pretty much if you're looking at tracks, scats are also going to come into it at some point, because you're going to probably want to be able to identify the animal based on as many clues as you can. And that's where the other clues get incorporated, is your tracks, your scats, feathers, nests, any kind of clue that you can find out there to an animal's presence is essentially a track or a sign. So it goes beyond just footprints. But the footprints themselves, it's good to learn those, because that's the basics, that's the ABCs of tracking, is learning to recognize the footprints and identify them to the particular species that made them.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people would have fun with that, just like identifying tracks, certain shape aspects and patterns. So it's kind of like learning flowers or learning birds or learning the leaves of some plants. It's got a similar thing to that.
Yeah, because it is shape and pattern recognition. Because you also recognize the gait.
Yeah. And
the gait is a pattern. So there will be a particular pattern made when an animal is using a certain gait on the landscape. So that also is helpful. So it is really about shape and pattern recognition for sure.
And then, what do you mean by gait?
The gait would be how the animal is moving. So whether it was walking, running, loping, galloping, trotting, all of those different gaits will make different patterns in the tracks on the ground. Mm-hmm. So as the animal moves across the landscape at different speeds, you can read that in the tracks by determining how, how the gait pattern on the ground relates to the speed that the animal is moving.
Yeah, and I like the point you made about putting the clues together. So people read detective stories, and maybe want to solve a crime or something, but there's all this detective work that's going on 24/7, 365 all around them, where they could
Right.
get the clues and put the pieces together and be like a detective or a scientist. Get
Right.
the observations and put them together to form conclusions. So,
Mhm.
like,
And that's that whole concept of tracking as being the original science. There's a book by Lou Liebenberg that's freely available on the Cybertracker website
cool.
called The Art of Tracking: The Origin of Science. And in there he talks about how tracking may have been the original science because, if all of us follow our ancestors back far enough, we get to the hunter-gatherers who used tracking more on a day-to-day basis than obviously we use it now.
Mhm.
But, we follow those ancestors back and we find that they all used this skill. So they would find a track, make a hypothesis about it, and come up to conclusions by following the evidence that's before them. And, if they found a deer track and they followed it and came to a deer, then, they could hunt that deer. So the kind of the whole theme of that book is that science, the original science, was tracking because all of our ancient ancestors were using this skill, and it's how we kind of developed our ability to think in a scientific manner.
Yeah, it's interesting.
To question, come up with hypotheses and questions and find evidence and come up with answers.
Yeah. And I'll put links to that in the show notes, folks. So I'll put a
It's a
link
really
to
good book to read. Yeah,
Good.
really useful.
I had a question, Kim. I have a question. I said, how do you tell how old tracks might be? Like, I'm sure you have ways of figuring out how long it's been since the track was left there?
Yeah, there's a few ways to do it. Of course, keeping track of the weather in the area where you find the track, that helps. So you know when the last time it rained or when the last time it was really windy, because rain can put pock marks in tracks and the wind will blow debris into the tracks. You can also look at the color differences between the soil that has not been stepped on versus the soil that has been stepped on. Because usually, especially in a dry environment, if you walk across it, your feet will disturb the surface layer, which is dried by the sun, and the layer beneath it will be darker because it has more moisture in it, and so that will eventually dry out over time. But as you walk across a dry soil surface, you're exposing the moisture soil beneath it. So that helps you tell fresh from old tracks, the color difference. Also looking at the edges of a track and seeing how sharp they are in comparison to, you can press your thumb into the ground next to it to give you just a kind of spur of the moment comparison to what the super fresh track looks like and what the one you're looking at. So there's a lot of different factors that go into aging, but anything that can weather a track, you have to kind of keep track of.
Yeah.
Especially things like wind and rain, but the more obvious ones. But also just generally gravity and sunshine being on a track tends to degrade it also because it dries the edges and makes individual grains of sand fall into the track, so it kind of rounds off the edges.
Yeah. So you have to take a lot of the context into account. Really.
Yeah, you do have to look at the context and also position. So say a car drives down a dirt road and then somebody walks across that track of the car, their track will be on top of the tire tread. So position will also help you.
And that's
Very
good
cool.
stuff. That really would help students learn to think better in a way they unfortunately don't, like with math. I mean, I have a degree in math. I love math.
Right.
I'm not knocking it. But unfortunately, when people do a lot of math problems, I mean, what do? It's every one in isolation. They don't really think about, does this answer make sense? How does it relate to other things I know? But with what you're talking about with the tracking, that is so beautiful and so powerful. They're looking at, you have to look at what's going on in context. Like you say, is the footprint on top of the tire track? What direction it's going? What is the edge like? So as I say, when I learn that, it's like some foraging stuff and botany and zoology and tracking, I feel like since it's from the ground up, I feel like I've learned that science for the first time in my life.
Yeah, because it gives you that experience of going through the deductive reasoning process and looking at all the clues that you see there and interpreting them. So it really gives your mind a workout.
Yeah. And that induction, too, of getting the concepts and propositions in the first place and forming the general ideas that you can then go on to deduce.
Right.
Just like Mr. Sherlock Holmes does all these experiments in his lab, induces certain relationships and identifies characteristics of things, and then goes out in the field and deduces.
Right, and the Sherlock Holmes novels also incorporated tracking. So, that's another thing that it isn't as commonly used nowadays, but it could be, and it probably should be. I think that when they do the crime scenes, they go to look for fingerprints, but who thinks to look for footprints and track things like that? I mean, I'm sure they do a little bit, but there are places where you can get training in tracking people also, and tracking crime scenes and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's another place where it could be very useful.
Yeah, and I see you're certified in that as well, SAR.
Yeah. There's a place that I would go to up in Oregon. Universal Tracking Services offers training for search and rescue. They also train like law enforcement and stuff, and some, I think, military has been trained in it. But it really can decrease the time on a search. So you want to, say you've got somebody lost out in the forest, and it's going to rain that night or something. You want to be able to find them more quickly. And the whole search and rescue thing they've got formulas for how long a person's been lost and calculating your estimated search area based on, say, a person can walk 2 miles an hour, and so they make a big circle and figure, for each hour that circle expands outward a certain amount of, based on how fast a person can walk. And so with tracking, you can redirect the search. If you get a tracker out there and they can locate the lost person's tracks, they can actually cut down that search area and help narrow it down. If you have a couple of well-trained teams of trackers, they could actually follow the tracks and find the person a lot quicker than just the standard, getting in a line and beating the brush kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then...
So I think it could be very... It could be really useful in that, and I think where it originally came from, the Ab Taylor was a Border Patrol guy back in the 60s and 70s, and he utilized tracking to try and find a kid that was lost down at the state park I used to work at, Palomar Mountain. A young boy, I think he was 9 years old, got lost down this really steep, rugged canyon, and they tried to find him, and they used tracking skills that he had developed in his career as a Border Patrol guy, used tracking skills to try to locate this lost kid. Unfortunately, it did not turn out very well. But he passed. But out of that came this kind of the push to teach search and rescue people tracking. And so Ab Taylor started this whole program to begin teaching these tracking skills to the folks that actually were the volunteers that go find lost people. And he also created a program called Hug-a-Tree, which is still being taught, where they teach the kids to carry a trash bag with them that they can use like as an emergency shelter, and to stay in one place, hug a tree, and wait for the searchers to find you and things like that. So that particular program is still around, still being taught to kids to try and help them if they get lost, what they should do.
Yeah, and I think for one thing, that'd be really good for some people to kind of go towards as a goal. Homeschoolers, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, an adult who wants to take up a hobby. SAR would be good for... Pardon?
Yeah.
A good exercise.
There's a lot of activity. Yeah.
Go ahead,
definitely.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say there's plenty of activities you can do with it depending upon the age of your students, and anything from making plaster castings of the tracks to incorporating it into math. There's some formulas that came from an Army study where they, calculated the length of the first person's footprint and tried to calculate their height based on that. So you could incorporate math into it. You could work it into all the lesson plans. Certainly biology and learning about the local wildlife and things like that. But depending on the age of your students, it could be tracking activities could easily be worked in.
Yeah, and physics, pressure, based on direction.
Mm-hmm.
Kim,
pressure.
when something's moving forward, what part of the track will be deeper?
Well, it depends. When humans move forward, we tend to strike heavier on our heels because of the way we walk.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to hit the ground first with the heel, and then we pivot forward, and our toe tends to dig in as we push off in the next stride.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on how the animal is moving. If you're just walking, it's going to be different. It's going to be more like a stamp. If you're running, most people that run tend to run on the ball of their foot, and so you're going to get more of a dig in with the toes and a push back with the ball of the foot if you're running. So a lot of it depends on speed, which part of the track is going to create the most impact.
Mm-hmm.
But you could totally do that with physics. You could have somebody, you could set up your own little sandbox and have somebody walk through it,
Mm-hmm.
then have somebody run through it, then have somebody walk backwards through it and see how that changes your tracks.
Yeah.
Because it makes them look different.
Yeah, all the poundage and force and pressure going on there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. And if people learn some of this stuff too, then maybe fewer people would get lost, or they'd know how to make sign to help someone find them better.
Right, yeah, help somebody find them better, or help them find themselves, find their own way back if they get lost. And,
Mm-hmm.
Shuffling the ground every few feet or something, making obvious signs so you know where you went, or even something like breaking dead branches. But yeah, it's always pretty useful to know how to track your way back.
Mm-hmm.
I've used it a few times.
Yeah. So, for people out there, what are the differences between a dog track and a cat track?
Okay, dog and cat. So these are the two that get confused a lot, dog versus mountain lion. And so I tell you, I've had so many emails. I actually did a presentation on this back in 2010. We had a tracking conference in Washington, and I actually did a presentation on the public perception of dog tracks versus mountain lion tracks. And I used, just as the data set, I used my own emails and went back through my emails for the previous 10 years and made some tallies. And I think my tally was something like 89% of the tracks that folks sent me that they thought were mountain lion were actually domestic dog tracks.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very high percentage. And then there were other things in there like, raccoons and squirrels and all kinds of stuff. But to tell the difference between mountain lion and dog tracks, one of the big misconceptions is that dog tracks always show their claws. And they don't always show their claws. So most of your field guides show them with claws because the field guides show the idealized perfect track. And so look for claw marks, but also use other factors. And one of those would be the symmetry of the track. So if you imagine taking a complete track with all four toes and cutting it in half down the middle vertically, both sides of it could be mirror images. But if you did the same with a cat track, it would not be a mirror image because cat tracks have a leading toe. And when we look at tracks, we number the toes from the inside, so equivalent to our thumb being toe number 1 and our pinky being toe number 5. We number all toes 1 through 5. So on a mountain lion track, toe number 3, which is equivalent to our middle finger, is further ahead than toe number 4, which is equivalent to our ring finger. So if you just look at your own hand, you can see the basic structure of the asymmetrical mountain lion track by looking at where your fingers are in your hand. So we would call the pointer finger toe 2, toe 3 the middle finger, toe 4 the ring finger, and toe 5 the pinky finger. So if you look at your own hand, you can see how an asymmetrical track would look. You cut it down the middle. Go ahead.
Oh, she just got a glass of water or something, I think.
Oh, okay. So, So usually toe number 3 leads on the mountain lion track, and that is also true for your bobcats and domestic cats. It's most pronounced on the front feet, a little less pronounced on the hind feet. The hind feet of cats can resemble dog tracks pretty distinctly, so that can get a little confusing. Also look for on the pad, which trackers call it the metacarpal and metatarsal pad, but I'll call it, just for ease of communicating it, I'll call them palm and heel pads. So on the front foot, the palm pad has 2 lobes on the leading edge and 3 lobes on the trailing edge, so the edge that faces backwards. So if you kind of connect the dots, it sort of looks like an M shape. You don't often see very clearly the 2 lobes on the leading edge because, you know, if you're in perfect mud, you might see them. If you're in sand, it tends to collapse a little bit. But what you will see is sort of a trapezoidal shape to that palm pad on the front foot. And it's a large palm pad relative to the size of those toes. So on a dog track, the palm pad is a little bit smaller than that on a cat track. On the cat track, if you could imagine picking up all the toes and placing them inside the palm pad, if you could do that, they would mostly all fit. 3.5 to 4 toes will fit inside the overall shape, size or real estate of that palm pad. Whereas on a dog track, if you imagine the palm pad, if you imagine picking up the toes and putting them in there, you can get maybe 2, maybe 3 of the toes into the palm pad of a dog because they're a lot smaller than the palm pads of a cat. That's on the front feet. So on the hind feet, both animals have smaller pads. Mountain lions still have the 2 lobes on the leading edge of the hind feet and the 3 lobes on the trailing edge. So you also look for that asymmetry and also look at the toe shape. So the mountain lion has very teardrop-shaped toes that sort of come to a point at the top, and dog toes tend to be more round and blocky-looking. Their outer toes on a dog tend to look more triangular in shape also. So there's a lot of things to look at. I have a very detailed PowerPoint that goes into that on my website on the canine versus feline page that you're welcome to download, distribute, study it. But those are the main, most important things to look at, I think.
Yeah, so people can look to see pictures of this. Look at dog and cat, mountain lion, bobcat on Kim's website that we'll put in the show notes. Then if you want to replay this part, look at it again. Look at it while she's talking. That might help. So a lot of times when people read in the news that, look, there's a mountain lion in our town, probably not, and go compare the tracks with what is on Kim's site or what some experts say, because even sometimes, unfortunately, Kim, don't you find that, unfortunately, some so-called trackers or park employees get that wrong too, whether it's a dog or mountain lion?
They do. They get it wrong a lot. And that goes back to there not being any training in tracking in the wildlife management programs that the folks come through, that go to those jobs. And I went through a wildlife management program and I didn't get any training in tracking there. It's something you have to pursue it on your own if you're interested. So it does, even though you're working as a ranger or, a biologist, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're trained as a tracker.
Yeah.
That's something that you have to separately pursue, and it isn't really offered. Very few colleges have tracking programs.
That's something we got to remember in general with this, folks. Make sure someone is trained in a certain area, no matter what their profession. Teacher, doctor, scientist, biologist. There are certain things, they're nice people, they're smart, they're trained, but there are certain things they do not know, and we should not be asking them.
Right, yeah.
But that's just...
not every person knows this. Yeah. It's a specialized skill.
Pardon?
It's a very specialized skill. It takes a lot of time to learn it well, and you have to have a lot of patience to spend the time to learn it.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It's definitely worthwhile learning it.
Yeah, it's fun. Gets you outdoors, gets you involved in nature. As I say, gets you thinking. observing.
Right.
I know it,
Yeah.
as I say, like the shapes of plants, and the tracks, the colors, the patterns, the
Mhm.
shapes, and the textures and everything. I started learning this stuff a few years ago, and it like turned my brain for a loop because I'm used to math and
Right.
maybe working out. I've got like zero like drawing or art background, and so
Right.
to get used to the shapes and colors and everything, it just took a while for all that to like sink into my neurology and brain and mind.
Yeah. Sure.
But we got to
And
remember that's something that learning new things helps us stay young. Very important.
Yeah, and I think it trains your brain to think in a different way too,
Hmm.
rather than just the straight rote memorization. I think it trains your brain to look at things and analyze an entire scene,
Yeah.
to take all the factors that you're seeing there. And the more you get into tracking and identifying tracks and sign, I think the more you see the depth that is there and how much we actually miss because,
Hmm.
we don't know to look for it or we don't really take it into consideration.
Yeah.
You can find a track on the beach, but you have to take into account everything that's there and, whether there's humans walking on the beach with their dogs and whether or not, there's food thrown about that scavengers might want to come for and what sort of habitat it is. All those different factors play into the whole identification thing, and so your brain starts to think in a little bit more of a detailed manner, I think.
Hmm. Yeah.
You just retrain yourself,
Yeah. More detailed and then more general. You're paying more attention to the big picture and how things fit together.
Right, yeah. It teaches you to slow down and really pay attention to those details.
And I think that's an important skill if people think in principle, and you learn this, especially when you're younger. When you're older, it's important too. But if you learn these kind of thinking skills of paying attention to detail and then making these connections, I mean, that would help in marketing, business, physics, everyday life, avoiding danger when you're downtown.
Yeah. Learning a language, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like in marketing, we don't just want to put things in isolation, but people should think about what's the product, who's the client you're trying to market it to,
Mm-hmm.
what about the product matters, how does it help the person, how does it help them live a better life and be happy and be in society instead of just trying to sell something.
Yeah. Exactly.
But and I think this gets us outdoors a lot more, puts us more in touch with the world we come from. I think some people get too caught up or insulated by human society and parties and buildings and kind of lose touch with a very important fundamental aspect of themselves and of being human.
And we're really going more and more towards being oriented towards technology and getting away from more nature-based observation and science and I think that's a backwards thing. We need to go back to our roots, I guess, essentially, and
Agreed.
spend more time in nature. And there's the whole concept that's being recognized now of the forest bathing.
Yeah.
Japanese have the Shinrin Yoku concept. Going out into the forest and nature and just experiencing it. Turn off all the technology and just go sit under a tree for a while and take it all in and absorb that energy. And there's been some really fascinating studies done on that and the effect that it has on your overall creativity, your overall sense of well-being, your stress level, your cortisol levels come down, your pulse rate comes down, blood pressure comes down. So being in nature itself is just an overall good thing for humans. And if we can slow down a little bit and leave our devices at home and just go out and experience nature, I think it will help our overall physical health as well.
Yeah, and I think it's an important thing for people to learn. Go out and do it. The important thing is to experience it and to live it, not to know it or science it. The science is important, but only insofar as helping us live and thrive and survive. So if you get out there, you'll experience the benefits yourself. Don't say, well, I need scientific proof first, because part of scientific proof is the evidence of the senses, and that's on you. If people get out there, they'll live the benefits of better thought, lower stress, more creativity, and then they can study it to see what's going on and why, but it starts with your feet on the ground.
Right, and then, to relate that back to tracking, if you go out there with the goal to just look at tracks and try to identify basically what animals are there and what aren't, what tracks and signs you can find and identify which species live there, that's just fun. I mean, it doesn't have to be a science thing. Yeah. It could be done just for fun, just for your own information, your own curiosity about your own environment, and just to see who actually lives there, because a lot of these animals are nocturnal. So for our own sense of curiosity, because we're human, we're all very curious, and I think all of us are interested in animals. I think just that aspect of it could make it just a fun outing, just to go out and do.
Yeah.
That makes me think of how.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that they think of how it's almost summer, and so that's kind of vacation season a lot for families. What a cool way to.
Melanie's in Minnesota where it's cold. She says it's almost summer. People are gonna start getting out, and I'm like, ha ha ha! I've been out every day all year.
Oh no.
All we see is white. And there are some tracks in the snow. I must say, Kim, we do get some tracks. Actually, it's pretty easy to see the tracks here once we get that fresh layer of snow. It's pretty cool.
Oh, and Kim, Melanie and her kids are so annoying. Like I've said on the Facebook page, I've wanted to see a shrike for a long time. So I'm teaching Melanie's kids science. And one day we're starting class, and they go, "Oh, what's that bird out there?" And here I've been trying to see a shrike around here, or some lizard it has on a tree somewhere for years. And what happens? Melanie's the one that sees a shrike in the winter up there.
Oh, no.
I wanted to poke my eyes out. I'm so jealous.
No.
I videotaped it for you and sent it to you. So
yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
but I was just thinking, as far as families getting out together and doing something like this, because they could actually journal this, and they could compare, like when they go to Michigan, say Upper Michigan versus Upper Minnesota, they've got all this different, wildlife and plants and just, general. And man, that would be such a fun way to experience your vacation, but you're just way more in tune with what's going on, not just let's go vacation and then you just sit somewhere and basically veg out, as they say.
Yeah, you're at some place vacationing, like, what's there? What animal? Let's take pictures of the tracks and describe it.
Right, and then you can go on iNaturalist and put your tracks there and get them identified. There's a North American tracking database on iNaturalist, and there's also the Facebook group where we identify tracks that people send. And that group has members worldwide, so, if you go travel somewhere else and find a track and post it, chances are there might be somebody on there that could identify it for you. So it's kind of cool, if you find something that you can't identify. And some tracks are really confusing, and even very experienced trackers can't identify every single track, because there's some that just, are such a mess that you can't identify anything in it.
Oh, and that reminds me, and some stuff... people aren't familiar with. So I was so proud of myself one time. This made my year or something. On the Facebook page, I posted a track, and no one could figure it out. Not even Kim. That was so great. It was It was a track of a mussel, a freshwater mussel in a creek. Remember that, Kim?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
and it was such a weird look, and nobody got it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have got it unless I had followed my way to the mussel itself and knew it was there,
and dug it up.
Yeah, true. The creek had gone down, and there was a sandbar, and some water was trapped, and so the mussel couldn't get out, and so it moved its way along the sand to the deeper part of the puddle.
Yeah.
And I took some pictures of that track.
Yeah, I remember that one. I remember you posting that, and nobody could get it. We kept guessing. Everybody kept guessing and trying, but nobody could get that one. It was too hard.
Yeah, and then
I guess, sometimes there's just things that you have to be there and be able to follow it out.
Mm-hmm.
And, even then, some things just can't be identified.
And it's so unusual because we're used to dealing with things on the ground, solid ground.
Right.
I mean, mussel tracks are going to be in the water, and how often does the water go down when you get to see it like that?
Yeah, that's pretty rare. I think that was a super interesting find, and it was an educational experience for everybody too.
Yeah.
And it's something to look for.
Yeah, that's
or to
fun.
keep in our little bag of tricks.
Yeah.
For next time.
To kind of get back to your idea, Melanie, I think that'd be good for a lot of people. Kids especially, but people no matter what their age, keep like a naturalist notebook of your own. That's one thing people could do for science, because this would help with their observation, powers of observation, ability to make connections and do research. Keep a notebook on tracks you find, animals you see, plants, what's in your area. Keep a notebook of it. And then in homeschooling, students could compare with other homeschoolers in different parts of the city or different parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And especially when you journal it, you can do like different perspectives. So do the draw the immediate area around the track. And then take a step back and kind of look around, maybe 50 feet around, and see if there's any habitat type clues that might help, and then look at the overall thing. So expand your area to maybe a couple acres, and there's a creek over there, and there's a big hollow tree over here, and things like that will help you analyze the scene and figure out more about that particular habitat, that location, what animals might be there, and what possibilities there are.
Yeah.
So it could be a really interesting journaling experience to do that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and that reminds me really quickly. One thing I want to throw in is people, if you take a picture of a track or a plant, and it's not just for the beauty of the picture. If you want to know what the track is or something, please put in some frame of reference, like preferably a ruler.
Right.
Please.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Drop a coin in there. Put a ruler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had folks put credit cards in there before, but don't do that.
Yeah. And then I've heard sometimes you even got to be careful about keys nowadays, because I think some people can, from a picture, they can reproduce a key. Pardon?
Yeah, I've had a couple emailed to me with, showing the back of the credit card with the, because you can read the numbers backwards because they're imprinted, and then it's got the security code and everything on it.
Oh, yeah. Ow.
Head slapper there.
Yeah. Live and learn.
Don't send this to anybody unscrupulous.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So use something like a ruler or a penny, or even your finger if you don't have anything else. Stick your finger or your shoe in the picture and take a picture of the track with that as a scale.
Mm-hmm.
Some common object, a pen.
Yeah. And then, too, if you do have something you got to throw down, even if it's maybe a stick, bring it back with you, measure it, and then put that in the description in an email or message. This is how long the stick was. This is how wide it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. But
that could help.
Yeah. And then I think this is something people might think, whoa, this has got to be in nature. I'm not in nature. Like, what does this have to do with me? I'm not near a park. Well, most people can go to a park, go to a wilderness area sometime or other. By the way, remember there's a difference between the wilderness and managed nature. Sometimes what people think is wilderness is really managed nature. But this can still be done like everywhere. Because everyone has dogs, cats, around.
Right.
And unfortunately, if you live in a crowded area, you're going to have mice and rats and stuff like that. But,
Yeah.
tracking, we think of the big, like, cool animals like mountain lions. But remember, there's also dogs, domestic cats, and insects, moth,
Right.
slugs,
Yeah.
roaches, ants. It is not boring to track an ant. I mean, try to tell the difference between like a wasp on the ground and an ant on the ground or something,
Oh, right. Yeah.
That takes some powers of observation
Or-
and learning and thought too.
And finding the little tiny rodent tracks and shrews,
Yeah.
things that are really small like that. Those make life interesting. Birds. There's birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To add to that, we had a problem with some mice in the house a while back, just a few years back, but turns out that the company that came out to try to figure out what was going on, they did a lot of what you were just describing, which was trying to figure out where they were getting into the house.
Yeah.
And so, there's a career right there where even the tracking of the smallest little rodents, mice or whatever's getting in, would take some effort, and some thinking and knowing the species, what's kind of typical of this species to do, and at different times of year, because we go through 4 season changes, so maybe they're more apt to come in an area that's warmer. I'm just throwing those out there, but so I'm sure that would make the job that they do even more interesting because they've got to kind of sleuth, and figure it out a bit. So
They do. Yeah. I've seen those guys where they find, the rats came in here because of the rat grease that comes off the animals as they go through holes and things like that, and they really do need to be able to identify scats and tracks that they find in attics.
yeah,
That's another important skill for those guys.
right.
Cool. And then around the everyday, like most people's houses too, even if you live in a subdivision, as I say, you can practice going on the street or some driveway sometimes, dog tracks, cat tracks, squirrels, birds. What kind of bird track is that?
Yeah.
What was the bird doing?
Right.
Where is it going?
Yeah.
So,
And in most of,
go ahead,
I
sorry.
was going to say, most of the urban areas now have populations of coyotes, and
Yes,
raccoons
thank
and
goodness.
skunks are also pretty common. Yeah. So there's also a few wild species that are able to adapt enough that they can live right alongside humans, and they just adapt their hours. They become more nocturnal, and those would be interesting to track also, because I was raised in a suburb, and I used to find raccoon and opossum tracks in the backyard, and nobody would believe me because it was a suburb, and they're like, those animals aren't here, but they are there.
Yeah.
The tracks don't lie. There was a raccoon here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And people need to,
Yeah.
I think, learn to be more okay with that. I think too many people are scared of nature, or they think it's something bad.
Yeah.
But I think that's a lot of it is because of a lack of experience. Like Danny on the last podcast said, something like, what we don't know, we fear, and what we fear, we want to destroy. Unfortunately, in some
true.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And negative images that have been in the media also. Bears are always shown as being scary animals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And mountain lions are always shown as being these bloodthirsty killers. But, humans aren't on the menu.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. People
We're
don't know
not.
enough about that.
Yeah.
But didn't that come up a lot in what is that book about the lion that went from the Midwest to,
Yeah.
remember the name of that book?
The Lion's Journey or something, or Journey of a Mountain Lion. I forget what it's called.
Let me see.
I can't remember the name exactly, but I know which one you're talking about. I think Stoltenberg is the author. Is that right? Does that sound right?
I don't recall. It's like not coming up in my brain at all right now. I gotta.
Yeah, it was like The Long Walk, The Cougar's Long Walk or something. I don't know. I can't remember.
Let me see. I'm
have to
searching
Google
now. I'll see what I can find. Oh, duh. I should be looking on Amazon. But I'm going to look it up because it takes some time because I recommend, I'll put that in the show notes. I recommend that to people to help them learn more about.
It was a very good book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talks
Yeah,
about.
it was an excellent book.
Yeah. Because as you say, Kim, not a lot of people are actually killed by mountain lions.
Yeah, it's very rare for that to happen. I mean, your chances of getting struck by lightning are higher than your chances of getting killed by a mountain lion. It's a very rare occurrence. Or, more people are killed by domestic dogs every year than are killed by mountain lions.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's something that.
Statistically.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Oh, here it is. And I'm going to put it in the show notes, folks. And Melanie, this is a book I have in mind for your kids to read when we get around to it also.
Oh, okay.
It's
That's...
Heart of a Lion by, as Kim remembered, Stolzenberg, William Stolzenberg.
There you go. Okay.
And I will.
And then there's another one by Leslie Patton. There's a really good one, a recent publication by Leslie Patton, Patten, that was also about mountain lions, and it was really good. And it also talked about tracking, and interviewed a number of trackers. And it was really well done as far as like the biology of the mountain lions, and
cool.
And I recommend that one as well. I don't remember the title.
It's Ghost Walker: Tracking a Mountain Lion's Soul Through Science and Story.
There you go. Yeah, it was a really, really good book. I enjoyed that one.
And that will be in the show notes. Thanks, Kim.
Awesome.
And then there's a book about coyotes I'm not going to recommend, except for like older people. I'm not going to mention the name because it's not appropriate. Some of the stuff for younger children, because some of the stuff in it, unless a parent wants to let their kid read. But but yeah. So as we say, there's even in subdivisions, we got raccoons sometimes, possum. People can track those. Squirrel, what does a squirrel track look like? What does squirrel mark look like? And then people can just do that, just like bird watching. I don't know, some people are like, I don't know anything about birds. I don't care, but I want to see them and identify them. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But then if you start really digging into it, you can do so much more and make it so much more fun and so much more interesting to you when you know the nature of the bird, what the bird does, not just the name of the bird, but where it goes, how it flies, how it moves, how it lives, what it eats.
Yeah.
Same thing with the squirrels and the raccoons. Pardon? Sorry, Kim.
Oh, I was going to say, how it builds its nest, because some of them have really interesting ways of building nests, and like the rock wren actually will make a little path out of rocks to its nest, which is hidden in the jumbled boulders.
Oh, cool.
So it's a fascinating way a lot of these animals live.
Yeah.
And the more you study about it, the more fascinated you get with it.
Yeah, true. It's like, okay, I have a degree in math. I have a degree in philosophy. I tutor math. I know calculus. I've studied, math stuff. But no, calculus is easy. Biology is complex and complicated. You want easy, do calculus. You want to really have complexity and be able to do things forever and dig into stuff? No. Do biology.
Right. It's very fun.
Yeah.
The more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know, and the more you are intrigued by the things that you do see, and you want to learn more.
Yeah.
I think that's, even getting certified with CyberTracker, once you get your track and sign specialist, that's not the end of the journey right there. That's just, you now have, some recognition for your skill, but you also have, one of my friends called it a license to learn. And that's basically what it is, because by the time you get there, you have spent so much time studying the biology of all these animals that, it just becomes something that you're absolutely fascinated with, and you have to know more.
Yeah.
So it drives itself. It drives you to desire to learn more. The more you realize that there is out there, and how fascinating the life histories of all these animals are.
Yeah,
at least for me, I think just that that's one of the main keys is the fascination. If you can find something that absolutely fascinates you, then it makes it fun. I mean, it's not like it's work to try and learn about this. It's actually an enjoyable process because you're feeding your own, your own sense of fascination with the life histories of the animals, and it makes it just a really fun thing to do.
Yeah, true. That's kind of how I started. So people can do, even if they start going out more on trails sometimes, if they can, like run on trails or walk on trails instead of concrete sometimes, and then start looking around, That's kind of what I did. I was exercising outside for years, and then a few years ago, I'm like, wait, I'm a stranger here. I see all this green and stuff, but it's like I'm an alien on this world. So I started looking into foraging and tracking, and like one thing leads to another, in a way that you can't really do like in math or some other subjects. It's so limited.
Right.
And there's so much involved, like you say, when you're looking at some tracks, like today I was playing around and following an armadillo track, and it's in the woods. You can't just unless she's like really talented and a contortionist, no lady can go out there in her high heels and a dress and do this stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So like I'm looking at this track and I want to follow it, and like sometimes I like to be the armadillo or be the raccoon. And so I'm following along with the track, and I got to get down on my belly and crawl under this like limb that's only like a foot tall or something, this little branch, then crawl over this log. So you're having fun. And there's, so I'm doing all this really mobility work. People pay a lot of money for in a yoga class, but it's fun. I'm not even noticing I'm doing it. There's all this mobility and agility and strength going on, moving my body in different ways, following the armadillo track, wondering what it's doing and where it's going. So there's so much to it. Can't get that in my class.
I've seen that video, Michael. We'll have to post that.
Oh, the one I did today?
Very good. Yeah, we should post that. It's very good. Kids could really enjoy. You could call it, let's be the armadillo, or what I mean. It's kind of cute. They'd love that.
I gotta send that to Kim and see what she thinks.
Yeah.
Get the approval of a master.
That's kind of what it feels like when you're following bears, because you have to do the same thing.
Yeah.
You have to kind of follow where they go, and bears are little contortionists too. I mean, they go. Of course, they go through poison oak. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's right.
They go through berry brambles like nothing, and where a human would get ripped to shreds going through it. But following bears is fun because they're large animals like us, and they leave a lot of sign on the landscape, especially right now in spring when everything's green, and it's super fun to follow them. And even following deer can be entertaining.
Yeah, Kim, you suck. You get to do a lot of that. Bear, cougar, bobcat.
Yeah.
So nice.
Yeah, we got them all. Yeah.
Cool. I like your pictures of bobcat and the tracks and stuff.
Yeah. I like feline tracks because they're overall round, and they just have such a neat appearance to them. Like, I don't know, like the nature of cats is they're just very careful with their placement of their feet, and their tracks sort of reflect that because they have the large pads that allow them to walk quietly. So they're pretty unique. Yeah.
Agile and powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, one time I was out crawling around doing some like hand-foot crawl, people call bear crawl, on the side of a creek, and sometimes I'm doing stuff like that, and all of a sudden, just kind of out of nowhere, I just start thinking that I'm like a bobcat, and this must be how it feels, walking on all fours, going like down this foot or two drop on the side of the creek and crawling along and then coming back up, and that must be what they feel like, and that is so cool.
Yeah, and that kind of gives you a more deeper insight into the animal and its life, because you're moving like it in its environment and seeing it from their perspective almost.
Yeah.
I think it kind of gives you an insight into what it's like to live as one of those animals and how they get around on the landscape.
It seems like it's probably something that's really more in our nature than maybe we realize or practice today, because, child, adult, whatever, primitive people did that for millennia and
right.
had to. So it's not just like a little children's game.
Right. Yeah, that's how our ancestors lived. So
yeah,
it is kind of getting back to our roots in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that happens sometimes too. Like, it's not necessarily deliberate thought, but it is because I've learned some stuff about animals and the environment. But sometimes they just all of a sudden out of nowhere, something in my brain kicks in, and I just like feel like I'm a deer or feel like I'm a raccoon,
Yeah.
Not, of course, when I'm driving my car, but when I'm out in the woods exercising,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's so interesting. Just fascinating psychologically.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting way. I mean, I've felt that too when following trails. It seems like you connect more to the animal, more on like a personal level than just sitting there reading a book and reading about its life history.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually out there in its environment, following its trail, and seeing what it sees on a daily basis. And so I think it does give you a better connection to that animal and helps you to understand a little better than just a book account can help you understand about the life history of those animals.
Oh, and then it occurred to me that in regard to how that might really be in our nature and psychology, I mean, that kind of thing is exactly what some people do when they're going after like serial killers or something. They try to put themselves in their shoes and see what they're like, so they know how to go after them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then
the mindset.
Then it occurred to me that that's what the human predators do to their victims too.
Mm-hmm.
To some extent, and they kind of. Pardon?
They get in the mindset, or they kind of figure out how they might be thinking, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but maybe it's more like, in regard to some human criminal predators, maybe that's more like, I forget what they call that, like marking or targeting or something, who's weak.
Yeah.
So that's a little different thing. But then to catch the criminals, I think you got to kind of put yourself in their shoes, so to speak.
Yeah.
But
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting theory.
But yeah, again,
Kim,
there's the idea really quickly that biology is complicated, math is not. Sorry, Go ahead, Melanie.
Oh, I was just going to say, from a parent's perspective, which I have because I've been doing this for a long time now. I have 3 kids, and they're all pretty different from each other, but one in particular stands out as not being very comfortable in nature and wanting to go outdoors and do things. Person's very comfortable sitting at with a book or a laptop and looking at things that way. But any tips or advice just to kind of give? I mean, do you just got to push them, or are there things that you could think of that would really? Because he has a lot of curiosity about things, but I think there's this sort of almost a fear of it, and I'm not sure where that comes from exactly. But
well, the fear of it probably. I mean, I don't know where really the fears come from of nature, other than like images we see maybe on the media or something like that, where animals are portrayed as being negative.
Yeah.
I would try to, if he's more comfortable on a laptop or with a device, maybe go for a weekend and visit a park and go camping and allow him to take the device, and sit at a picnic table in a more wild area and just sort of experience it with those devices there as sort of a safety net, and then just do that often enough and try to get more exposed to nature so that he eventually might want to, go, and maybe let him sit with the device for an hour or two, and then maybe go over and sit next to him with some binoculars and look at birds and and say, hey, look at this bird, and, try to encourage them just gently, without just yanking the devices away or anything like that, but give them a gentle introduction to nature, slowly ease them into it, and start with safe things like birds, or, spotting deer through binoculars from a distance, or maybe even photography, and trying to take pictures of the animals, and if he likes computers, maybe editing those pictures for exposure, or for, cropping out the animal and making the picture look better.
Right.
Things like that can relate nature to what he likes, and just take it slow.
Yeah, that's a good way to kind of bring it into your world, and then maybe the association becomes a positive one. I like that.
Yeah, so then it's not a negative thing. It's just more, gradually associating nature with more positive experiences.
Yeah, and I think we're getting there, and I know Michael's a big help on this because he's really brought the kids out to nature in the science courses that he's teaching them. But they did go to a camp last summer, the older two, which is all outdoors. It's in the Boundary Waters. I don't know if you've heard of that location.
Oh, cool. Yeah, what a cool place.
Yeah.
It is very, pristine and untouched and very beautiful. And so they were there for a week and came back all really positive and great about it. But, looking forward to the next time, which will be this summer.
2 weeks.
But in the end, 2 weeks this time. Yeah. But in the interim, there's no desire to really do anything else. It's just like, oh, I'll go to that camp. But, that's it. It's not like, so we're working this summer, hopefully making big strides,
Yeah, there's in Minnesota they have the North American Bear Center that has, some resident bears that they can go and see, and I think they even let you feed the resident bears or something. That so it's more of an interactive experience, and you get to see some of these animals up close and learn about them, but in a positive way, so they're not portrayed as being fierce and bloodthirsty or anything like that.
Right.
They're portrayed in a positive manner as animals that are not after humans. Part of the menu or anything.
And if people got out, sorry, really quick, they'd learn more about that on their own. I know being outdoors, I've learned a lot about that and have very different attitudes because of my own experience and what I've learned firsthand than compared to what I used to think when I had following emotion or fear or convention. So now, I used to be really scared of snakes, but you're necessarily around them some when you're outdoors around here. Water moccasin, copperhead, coral snake, and then some semi-venomous or non-venomous snakes. And I've learned I can be really close to a copperhead and there's no reason to be scared. I've been around a copperhead within a few feet, a foot, 3 feet for 5 or 10 minutes, and you know what? I don't hurt it. It doesn't hurt me. Its purpose in life is not to kill me. Its purpose in life is to live, and it controls mice in the area, which makes it better for us. I've even stepped on a copperhead one time accidentally, and I didn't get bit. It just stayed there. I videoed it. We're both fine.
Yeah, they're not out to get us, and I think that's a good point. Just the way you did it, just the controlled exposure, and maybe you can go to one of those parks where they allow you to handle the animals, and they do that for folks that are afraid of snakes. They'll get them to the point where they can be in proximity with an animal, and then slowly expose them more to the snake or let them touch it, and eventually they'll get to the point where they can hold it and be okay with that. So that could also apply to nature. If there's a fear of nature or something, just a slow exposure, giving them positive experiences in nature, and just gradually working up to it. For homeschoolers, you could do something like have a science unit be your local animals and have them go out research each particular animal, and maybe go out, find its tracks for one assignment, or look up the feather patterns on a bird, or just small doses like that could be worked into your curriculum if you're a homeschooler, and try to get your student used to looking at natural environments and wild creatures and trying to identify them. Maybe that exposure would help a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Really good ideas.
And then we got to remember, there's also the complexity of there's those things to do. Oh yeah, I was going to say we're talking about what a parent can do to help their child, but I think the same stuff applies to what a person can do to help themselves deal with nature better.
Right.
But then in regard to some of what you're saying too about someone who doesn't like nature as much, we got to also consider step back, do the same thing we would do in tracking and think, okay, what is the animal? What is the person? Because there's some differences in boys and girls and how they develop. We're basically the same, but we have these variations also. Could be a boy-girl thing. And then the ability, like someone's got to learn to be independent and work with the world on their own and be self-confident. So that can be an issue also, because we're complicated.
We are, yeah.
And think of the
what?
Think of the confidence it would build in someone to know that they were very inhibited about even being outside much, to going to the camp for 2 weeks that's up in the Boundary Waters, or not being worried about walking into the woods and, you know, in the local area here and just kind of looking around. I mean, I can imagine that would just boost someone's sense of like, you know, I can manage this. I can live in my life and not have fear and concern. So that,
Yeah.
And we all recognize it. It comes up in a lot of movies, like, you know, the ones I've recommended, Melanie, like that movie. I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad. But the movie Alaska, about the kids who go try to find their dad who was in an airplane accident.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And then the movie, I don't know if you've seen this one, Kim, but the movie Duma, I think, D-U-M-A or D-U-M-A-S. It's so beautiful because it's, for one thing, it's got I think cheetah in it. Therefore, I love it. And at the beginning, the kid has a hawk that's a friend of his. When I saw that, it's like, this kid's great. I love him. I think it's this movie, if I remember right. But it's about this kid that has a cheetah, and he wants to, like, he goes across Africa on his own to bring it back to its home.
Oh, wow.
That's just the basic idea.
I haven't seen that. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, some of the cinematography is just beautiful, and sometimes the way the camera shows the cheetah, the eyes, the eyes of a cat. But some of the cinematography on showing the cheetah was just so beautiful. But that's one I recommend. That, it's not great, but it is a good movie. Let me see. Is it Duma? Maybe. I'll put that in the show notes too, folks. Duma.
Awesome.
Yeah, D-U-M-A.
D-U-M-A.
2005. Yeah. I'll have to watch that again. But, all right, so it's getting on about 8 o'clock here. Melanie has got to go do some stuff with their kids. So we'll go ahead and kind of wrap things up here. Is that okay, guys?
Yeah.
Sure.
Although we'll have to have another conversation about some of this stuff because so much more to talk about, so much more we could talk about. Like it'd be nice to go about, some of your own personal experience, Kim, like what your favorite animal is and your favorite track, and get into some more detail about tracking and stuff like that. This is like really good stuff.
Yeah, I love that. That would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
But
sounds good to me too.
Yeah, good. Okay, it's on record. I'm leaving that in the podcast, Kim. You're on record. You got to come back. So, as we said, start with whatever aspect of this you like, and then develop from there. But as we said, tracking will help you tremendously. Your brain, your neurology, help keep you younger, help you learn science and really how to think better. As we talked about, you can look at like what the track is, and then think what animal made it, then learn about the nature of the animal, and then think about what it would be doing in the environment for its life, and then think about the broader environment, what it's like, what else is here, and why. Start putting things together to see the whole ecology, the geography, physics, chemistry, weather, plants, animals, all the interaction. There's so much you can train yourself to do in terms of thinking here that I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah.
Y'all have anything else?
I agree.
Good. Thanks. Anything else, Melanie?
Just a big thanks to Kim for taking time out and,
Yes.
trying. I'm sure this is going to make a difference in people's lives. It's another way to look at their environment and be a part of it. It's amazing. It's just so stimulating, mentally and physically. So thanks again, Kim. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I found the same thing. I think tracking has really changed the way that I look at the environment and the outdoors, and there's no way to turn it off. Once you turn it on,
Yeah.
you're never going to turn it off again. You're never going to look at things the same way that you used to. Once you start tracking, you're going to start seeing so much that's out there. You're going to start noticing footprints, being able to identify so many animals that live around you, and it's a good thing. I mean, it's a really positive experience. It's not something you ever really want to turn off. So, highly recommend it.
Great. Yep.
Yeah, the only problem is the more you get, the more you want, but you need to work.
Exactly.
But maybe that'll inspire some people to do more stuff, because there's we need more farmers, more biologists, more naturalists, more park rangers. College is overrated. College is good for some people, but not everyone needs to go.
Right. Yeah, and we definitely need more people that will help out the environment and start working with the wildlife and just ecologists in general. I think we need more of.
Yeah. Like around here, I was talking to two moms this morning in the local park and asked them if they knew if there were any nature schools around here, but they said they didn't think there were. We need more nature schools. People who can do tracking and foraging and stuff to help with that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Any, books you could recommend, Kim? I've got the brown book on tracking. I looked that up on Amazon, so I'll put a link to that for folks. I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, and that one is more of a novel format rather than being a field guide. That one's more of a novel format. So as far as field guides, I like any of the field guides written by Mark Elbrock. There's a new version of the Mammal Tracks and Sign.
Yeah, go ahead. But I just remember, this is all on your website, right?
I think so. I don't know if I have links to every one of the books. I do have links to books on the website. But the Field Guide to Mammal Tracks and Sign is going to be a new edition coming out in July, which is highly anticipated by the tracking community. There's also a Bird Tracks and Sign book out there. And the Peterson Field Guide has been redone with photos, and it's really super nice. There's quite a few out there. I recommend those ones by Elbrock. And they really have it goes into depth. It goes into tracks and scats and feeding signs and burrows and a number of different signs you can find for each animal. So that's why I like those, because they're way more detailed than most of the field guides that have been available. So,
okay. So
those are the ones I recommend.
So we got the
and then,
brown.
of course, my website is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing. Yeah. Look at the website. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes, but go ahead.
Okay.
What else were you going to recommend? Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say my website has free resources also. I've got a printable track guide that you can print for free, and of course the website itself is free, and there's no ads on it other than just for my own little stores, but so it's ad free, and all the track images or everything there's for free. So
And I recommend it. Yeah.
that's out the resource as well. So, and then there's, if you have a track you have a question about, there's the Facebook groups, and Animals Don't Cover Their Tracks on Facebook is for identifying animal tracks. So if you're into that and you find something that you can't identify, post it there, and there's a bunch of trackers in there that'll help you identify what you found.
Okay. And I got that. If you can hear the keyboard going, I
can hear it.
Okay. I'm taking some notes on this so I don't forget, and I'll put it in the show notes for everybody. Okay, so good. Any last words, Kim? Last words again.
Thank you for having me on here.
Thank you. It was a
have to
great
come back.
discussion. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I'll have to come back and we'll talk tracking some more.
Awesome. Look forward to it. Thank you very much. All right. So
Have a good night.
bye, guys. Hope you enjoyed this.